I never thought a single photograph could unravel my entire existence. The afternoon light filtered through the kitchen window, casting long golden shadows across the worn linoleum floor as I stood there, my hands trembling, holding a faded picture that made no sense. The air smelled of the cinnamon rolls Mom had baked that morning, a scent that usually brought comfort but now felt suffocating, too sweet, almost nauseating. My heart hammered against my ribcage so hard I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, drowning out the distant hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the old wall clock that had marked every moment of my 23 years in this house. The photograph showed a woman I had never seen before, cradling a newborn baby wrapped in a yellow blanket. On the back, in my mother's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, Emma, 2 days old, with her birth mother, June 1999. I was Emma. I was born in June 1999. But the woman in the photo was not the woman I called Mom. My fingers felt numb as I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter, the cool laminate pressing into my palms. The house suddenly felt different, like I was seeing it for the first time, every familiar detail now strange and foreign. The family photos lining the hallway, the height marks on the doorframe, the chipped mug with my name on it, all of it felt like props in a play I had unknowingly been performing in my entire life. I heard the front door open, the familiar creak of the hinges that Dad always said he would oil but never did. Mom's voice called out, bright and cheerful, asking if I wanted tea. The sound of her footsteps approaching made my stomach clench. I quickly shoved the photograph into my back pocket, my hand shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. When she walked into the kitchen, her face lit up with that warm smile I had known all my life, the smile that had comforted me through scraped knees and broken hearts and every disappointment in between. But now, looking at her, I saw a stranger. Or maybe I was the stranger. Maybe I had always been. She stopped when she saw my face. Her smile faltered, and something flickered in her eyes, something that looked like fear. The afternoon light caught the silver streaks in her brown hair, and I noticed for the first time how different we looked. I had always been told I took after Dad's side of the family, with my dark blonde hair and green eyes, but now that explanation felt hollow, rehearsed, like a line from a script. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" she asked, her voice careful, measured. She set her purse down on the counter, the leather making a soft thud against the surface. The smell of her perfume, that familiar floral scent she had worn for as long as I could remember, wafted toward me, and I felt a wave of conflicting emotions. Love and betrayal tangled together so tightly I could not separate them. I pulled the photograph from my pocket and placed it on the counter between us. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched her face drain of color, watched her hand fly to her mouth, watched 23 years of carefully constructed lies crumble in the space of a single heartbeat. "Where did you find that?" she whispered, and her voice was so small, so broken, that for a moment I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. "I was looking for the old photo albums in the attic," I said, and my voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and cold. "I wanted to make a collage for your birthday. Instead, I found this. In a box. Hidden behind the Christmas decorations." She reached for the photograph with trembling fingers, but I pulled it back. The paper crinkled slightly in my grip, and I realized I was holding it too tightly, like it might disappear if I let go, like this whole nightmare might vanish and I could go back to the life I thought I knew. "Emma," she started, but I cut her off. "Who is she?" I demanded. "Who is the woman in this picture? And why does it say birth mother?" The words hung in the air between us, heavy and sharp. "Mom," The woman I had called Mom for 23 years sank into one of the kitchen chairs, her legs seeming to give out beneath her. She looked older suddenly, the lines around her eyes deeper, her shoulders hunched. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, marking each agonizing second of silence. "Her name is Rachel," she finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She's your biological mother." The room tilted. I gripped the counter harder, my knuckles turning white. Even though I had known, had seen the evidence right there in black and white, hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way that shattered something fundamental inside me. "Why?" I asked, and the word came out choked, strangled. "Why didn't you tell me? Why did you lie to me my entire life?" Tears were streaming down her face now, leaving wet tracks through her makeup. She looked up at me with eyes full of pain and regret and something else, something that looked like desperation. "We were going to tell you," she said. "We always planned to tell you. But then days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, and you were so happy, so perfect, and we were so afraid. Afraid you would hate us. Afraid you would leave. Afraid we would lose you." I felt my own tears burning hot trails down my cheeks, tasted salt on my lips. The kitchen felt too small, the walls closing in. I needed air, needed space, needed to be anywhere but here in this house that suddenly felt like a museum of lies. "You should have told me," I said, my voice rising. "You should have told me from the beginning. This is my life. My identity. You had no right to keep this from me." She stood up, reaching for me, but I stepped back. The hurt that flashed across her face was like a knife to my heart, but I could not let her touch me, not now, not when everything I thought I knew was falling apart. "Please, Emma," she begged. "Please let me explain. Let us explain. Your father should be here for this." "I don't want to hear it right now," I said, grabbing my keys from the hook by the door. "I need to get out of here. I need to think." "Emma, wait," she called after me, but I was already moving, my feet carrying me through the living room, past all those family photos that now felt like elaborate forgeries, past the couch where we had spent countless movie nights, past the fireplace where we had hung stockings every Christmas. Every memory felt tainted now, poisoned by the knowledge that it was all built on a foundation of lies. The front door slammed behind me, the sound echoing through the quiet suburban street. The late afternoon air hit my face, cooler than I expected, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and someone's barbecue. My car sat in the driveway, my old reliable Honda that Dad had helped me buy when I turned 16, and even that memory felt complicated now. Was any of it real? Did they love me, or was I just a replacement for something they could not have on their own? I sat in the driver's seat, my hands on the steering wheel, but I could not make myself turn the key. Where would I even go? My whole life was here, in this town, in this house, with these people who I thought were my parents. I had friends, a job at the local library, a routine, a life. But who was I really? Who was Emma if not the daughter of Margaret and David Thompson? My phone buzzed in my pocket. Mom. I declined the call. It buzzed again. Dad this time. I turned it off completely and tossed it onto the passenger seat. I drove without thinking, my body on autopilot, and found myself at the park where I had spent so much of my childhood. The swings where Mom had pushed me, the slide where I had scraped my knee and Dad had carried me home. The sandbox where I had built castles and dreamed of faraway places. I parked and walked to the old oak tree at the edge of the playground, the one with our initials carved into the bark. ET plus and T plus DT inside a lopsided heart. I had carved it myself when I was 12, so proud to be part of this family unit, this team. I sank down onto the grass, my back against the rough bark, and let myself cry. Really cry. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep and primal, that shakes your whole body and leaves you gasping for air. The sun was setting now, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple, and the temperature was dropping. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite my jacket. How long had they planned to keep this secret? Forever. Would I have ever known if I had not found that photograph? The thought made me feel sick. I pulled out the picture again, studying it in the fading light. The woman, Rachel, looked young, maybe 18 or 19. She had dark blonde hair like mine, and even in the grainy photo, I could see the resemblance. The shape of her face, the set of her eyes. This was the face I saw in the mirror every morning, not Mom's, not the woman who had raised me. Who was Rachel? Where was she now? Did she ever think about me? Did she regret giving me up? And why had she given me up in the first place? The questions swirled in my mind, each one leading to 10 more, until I felt like I was drowning in uncertainty. Everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. My medical history, my genetic background, my ancestry. I had always said I was Irish and German, because that's what Mom and Dad were. But what was I really? Who were my biological grandparents? Did I have siblings out there somewhere? Half-brothers or sisters who had no idea I existed? The park lights flickered on, casting yellow pools of light across the empty playground. I realized I had been sitting there for hours. My phone was still off, and I knew Mom and Dad were probably losing their minds with worry, but I could not bring myself to care. Let them worry. Let them feel a fraction of the chaos and confusion I was feeling. But even as I thought it, guilt gnawed at me. They had raised me. They had loved me. Every scraped knee they had bandaged, every nightmare they had soothed, every school play they had attended, every birthday they had celebrated. That was real, was it not? Love was not just biology. Love was showing up, day after day, year after year. But they had lied. That was real too. I finally stood up, my legs stiff from sitting so long, and walked back to my car. I did not want to go home, could not face them yet, so I drove to my best friend Sarah's apartment across town. Sarah and I had been inseparable since 3rd grade, and if anyone could help me make sense of this mess, it was her. I knocked on her door, and when she opened it, her face immediately shifted from surprise to concern. She took one look at me, my red swollen eyes, my tear-stained cheeks, and pulled me inside without a word. Her apartment smelled like the vanilla candles she always burned, and the familiar scent was comforting in a way that made me want to cry all over again. "What happened?" she asked, guiding me to her couch and wrapping a soft blanket around my shoulders. I was shivering, though I had not realized I was cold. She disappeared into the kitchen and returned with 2 mugs of hot tea, the steam rising in delicate spirals. I told her everything. The photograph, the confrontation, the revelation. She listened without interrupting, her eyes growing wider with each detail. When I finished, she set down her mug and pulled me into a tight hug. "Oh my God, Emma," she breathed. "I can't believe they never told you. That's huge. That's so huge." "I don't know what to do," I said into her shoulder. "I don't know how to process this. Who am I supposed to be now?" "You're still you," she said firmly, pulling back to look at me. You're still Emma. You're still my best friend who cries at dog food commercials and makes the best chocolate chip cookies and knows every word to every Taylor Swift song. Your DNA doesn't change who you are as a person. But it changes everything, I protested. My whole life has been a lie. Not your whole life, Sarah said. The lie was about where you came from. But everything else, all the memories, all the love, that was real. Your parents, they messed up big time by not telling you. That's not okay. But they did raise you. They did love you. That counts for something. I wanted to believe her, wanted to find some solid ground in this earthquake that had shattered my world. But I could not shake the feeling of betrayal, the sense that everything I thought I knew was built on sand. I stayed at Sarah's that night, curled up on her couch under a pile of blankets, but I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photograph, saw Rachel's face, saw the questions I needed answers to. By the time the sun rose, painting Sarah's living room in soft gray light, I had made a decision. I needed to talk to my parents. I needed the whole truth, no matter how much it hurt. Sarah made me breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast that I could barely choke down, and drove me home. The familiar sight of my childhood house made my stomach twist. Dad's truck was in the driveway, which meant he had stayed home from work. They were waiting for me. "Do you want me to come in with you?" Sarah asked, her hand on my arm. "No," I said. "I need to do this alone. But thank you. For everything." She hugged me tight, and I drew strength from her presence before climbing out of the car and walking up the path to the front door. It opened before I could reach for the handle. Dad stood there, and he looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face haggard, his usual neat appearance disheveled. Behind him, I could see Mom sitting at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug, staring at nothing. "Emma," Dad said, his voice cracking. "Thank God. We were so worried." I stepped inside, and the house smelled like coffee and something else, something stale and sad. The morning light coming through the windows seemed harsh, exposing every flaw, every crack in the facade. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "I need you to tell me everything. No more lies. No more secrets. Everything." They both nodded, and we sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where we had shared thousands of meals, where I had done my homework, where we had played board games on rainy Sundays. Now it felt like a courtroom, and I was both judge and jury. Mom took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she set down her mug. "Where do you want us to start?" she asked. "The beginning," I said. "Tell me about Rachel. Tell me about my adoption. Tell me why you kept it a secret." Dad reached over and took Mom's hand, and they exchanged a look that held years of shared history, shared decisions, shared guilt. Then Mom began to speak, her voice soft but clear. "We tried for years to have a baby," she said. "Years of doctors and treatments and disappointments. Every month was a cycle of hope and heartbreak. It nearly destroyed us. Finally, we decided to look into adoption. We went through an agency, filled out mountains of paperwork, went through home studies and interviews. And then, one day, they called us. They had a birth mother who had chosen us. Her name was Rachel." She paused, wiping at her eyes with a tissue. I sat perfectly still, barely breathing, afraid that any movement might stop the flow of truth. Rachel was 19 years old, Mom continued. She was in college, had her whole life ahead of her, and she got pregnant by a boyfriend who left the moment he found out. She was scared and alone and not ready to be a mother. She wanted her baby to have a stable home, two parents who could provide everything she could not. She chose us. The words hit me like physical blows. Rachel had chosen them. Had chosen to give me away. The rational part of my brain understood it, understood that she had been young and scared and trying to do what she thought was best. But the emotional part, the part that felt abandoned and unwanted, could not reconcile it. We met her several times during her pregnancy, Dad said, picking up the story. She was remarkable. Smart, funny, kind. She talked about her dreams of becoming a teacher, of traveling, of all the things she wanted to do with her life. And she talked about you. About how much she already loved you, even though she knew she could not keep you. I felt tears sliding down my cheeks again, but I did not wipe them away. I needed to hear this, needed to understand. When you were born, Mom said, her voice breaking, it was the most beautiful and heartbreaking day of our lives. Rachel held you first. She spent 2 days with you in the hospital, saying goodbye. That photograph you found, that was from those 2 days. She wanted us to have it, wanted you to have it someday, so you would know that she loved you, that giving you up was the hardest thing she ever did. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, the question that had been burning in my chest since yesterday. Why keep it a secret? Mom and Dad looked at each other again, and I saw shame written across both their faces. At first, we planned to tell you when you were young, Dad said. There are books about it, strategies for explaining adoption to children in age-appropriate ways. But we were so scared. Scared of saying the wrong thing, scared of confusing you, scared of losing you. So we kept putting it off. And then you started school, and we thought, we'll tell her when she's older, when she can understand better. But we never did, Mom said, her voice thick with regret. Every year that passed made it harder. We told ourselves we were protecting you, but really, we were protecting ourselves. We were cowards. And I am so sorry, Emma. You deserve to know the truth from the beginning. The silence that followed was heavy with years of unspoken truth. I looked at these two people who had raised me, who had loved me, who had also betrayed me in the deepest way possible. I felt anger and hurt and confusion, but underneath it all, I also felt something else. A tiny seed of understanding. They had made a terrible mistake, but they had made it out of fear and love, not malice. Do you have any other information about her? I asked. About Rachel. Do you know where she is now? Mom nodded and stood up, leaving the room for a moment. She returned with a manila folder, worn at the edges, and placed it on the table in front of me. Inside were papers, documents from the adoption, medical history, and a letter. The envelope was addressed to me in handwriting I did not recognize. My name, Emma, written in careful script. Rachel wrote you a letter, Mom said. She gave it to us the day you were born. She asked us to give it to you when you were ready, when you knew the truth. We've kept it safe all these years. My hands trembled as I picked up the envelope. It was sealed, the paper yellowed slightly with age. This was a message from the woman who had given birth to me, written 23 years ago. I was almost afraid to open it, afraid of what it might say, afraid of how it might change things even more. Can I started, my voice catching. Can I have some time alone to read this? Of course, Dad said immediately. Take all the time you need. We'll be here whenever you're ready to talk more. I took the folder and the letter and went upstairs to my room, the room that had been mine since I was a baby. The walls were still painted the soft lavender I had chosen when I was 13. My bookshelf was crammed with novels and textbooks and photo albums. My desk held my laptop and a collection of coffee mugs I had never returned to the kitchen. Everything was familiar, but I felt like a stranger in my own space. I sat on my bed, the mattress dipping under my weight with a familiar creak, and stared at the envelope for a long time. Finally, I slid my finger under the flap and carefully opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, covered in that same careful handwriting. Dear Emma, it began. If you are reading this, then you know the truth about where you came from. I hope your parents, Margaret and David, have told you with love and kindness. I hope you can understand why I made the choice I did. I want you to know that I loved you from the moment I knew you existed. Every kick, every hiccup, every flutter I felt reminded me that you were real, that you were mine, even if only for a little while. Giving you up was not about not wanting you. It was about wanting everything for you that I could not provide. I was 19, alone, and terrified. I had dreams of finishing college, of becoming a teacher, of building a life. But more than that, I wanted you to have two parents who were ready, who were stable, who could give you the childhood you deserved. When I met Margaret and David, I knew they were the right choice. I saw the love in their eyes, the desperation and hope and joy. I knew they would love you the way you deserve to be loved. I held you for 2 days. 2 perfect, heartbreaking days. I memorized your face, your tiny fingers, the way you made little sounds in your sleep. I wanted to keep you so badly it physically hurt. But I knew that love sometimes means letting go. I hope you have had a wonderful life. I hope you have been happy and loved and safe. I hope Margaret and David have been everything I believed they would be. And I hope, someday, if you want to, we might meet. I would love to know the person you have become. But if you are angry, if you feel abandoned or unwanted, please know that is not the truth. You were wanted. You were loved. You still are. Every year on your birthday, I think of you. I wonder what you look like, what you are doing, if you are happy. You have always been in my heart, even though I could not be in your life. I am so sorry if learning this truth has hurt you. That was never my intention. I only ever wanted what was best for you. With all my love, Rachel. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, soaking the paper. The words were so raw, so honest, so full of pain and love that I could barely breathe. This woman, this stranger who was also my mother, had loved me, had wanted me, had given me up not because I was unwanted, but because she wanted me to have more than she could give. I thought about Mom and Dad downstairs, probably sitting in anxious silence, waiting for me to come back down. I thought about Rachel, wherever she was, carrying this secret for 23 years. I thought about myself, caught in the middle of all this love and loss and complicated truth. The anger I had felt yesterday was still there, but it was softer now, mixed with sadness and understanding and a strange kind of grief. I was mourning the life I thought I had, the simple story I had believed. But maybe, just maybe, I could build something new from the pieces. Something more complicated, but also more true. I went back downstairs. Mom and Dad were exactly where I had left them, sitting at the kitchen table, holding hands, looking small and scared. When they saw me, they both stood up, their faces anxious. I read the letter, I said. My voice was hoarse from crying, but steady. I need time to process all of this. I'm still hurt. I'm still angry that you lied to me for so long. But I also understand that you were scared. That you made a mistake. A big mistake. Emma, Mom started, but I held up my hand. I'm not done, I said. I need time, but I also need you to know that I love you. You raised me. You were there for every moment of my life. That matters. That's real. But things are different now. I need space to figure out who I am with this new information. And I need you to respect that. They both nodded, tears streaming down their faces. We'll give you whatever you need, Dad said. Whatever time, whatever space. We're so sorry, Emma. We love you so much. I know, I said, and I meant it. I could see their love, could feel it in every word, every gesture. But love alone could not erase the betrayal, could not undo 23 years of lies. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into research. I read everything I could about adoption, about identity, about nature versus nurture. I joined online forums for adoptees, reading stories from people who had discovered their adoption late in life, people who understood the unique pain of having your entire identity questioned. Some of them were angry, some were at peace, some were still searching for answers. Their stories helped me feel less alone. I also started seeing a therapist, a woman named Dr. Chen, who specialized in adoption and family trauma. Her office was small and cozy, with soft lighting and comfortable chairs and a white noise machine that blocked out the sounds of the waiting room. She listened without judgment as I poured out my confusion and anger and grief. It's normal to feel betrayed, she told me during one of our sessions. Your parents kept a fundamental truth from you. That's a violation of trust. But it's also normal to still love them, to recognize that their actions came from a place of fear rather than malice. Humans are complicated. Families are complicated. You don't have to choose between being angry and being loving. You can feel both. Her words gave me permission to sit with the complexity, to stop trying to force myself into one emotional box or another. Some days I was furious with Mom and Dad. Other days I missed them terribly and wanted nothing more than to curl up on the couch with them and watch a movie like we used to. Both feelings were valid. Both were true. I also started thinking more about Rachel. The letter had opened a door in my mind, and I could not stop wondering about her. What did she look like now? Had she become a teacher like she had dreamed? Did she have other children? Did she ever regret her decision? And the biggest question of all, did I want to find her? The adoption had been semi-open, which meant that the agency had kept records and could facilitate contact if both parties agreed. Mom and Dad had given me all the information they had, including the name of the agency. It would be easy to reach out, to start the process of searching for Rachel. But was that what I wanted? Was I ready for that? I talked about it endlessly with Sarah, with Dr. Chen, with myself in the quiet hours of the night when sleep would not come. Part of me desperately wanted to meet Rachel, to see my own features reflected in her face, to ask her a million questions about her life and her family and my genetic history. But another part of me was terrified. What if she did not want to meet me? What if she had moved on, built a new life, and did not want to be reminded of the baby she had given up? What if meeting her made everything more complicated instead of providing the closure I craved? 3 months after finding the photograph, I finally made the decision. I was sitting in my apartment, the one I had rented a month earlier because I needed space from my childhood home, from the constant reminders of the life I thought I had known. The apartment was small, a studio with barely enough room for a bed and a couch and a tiny kitchen, but it was mine. A space where I could figure out who Emma really was. I picked up my phone and called the adoption agency. My heart pounded as I explained who I was, what I was looking for. The woman on the other end of the line was kind and professional. She explained the process, how they would reach out to Rachel, how it would be entirely up to her whether she wanted to make contact. There were no guarantees. Rachel might say no. She might have moved and left no forwarding information. She might have passed away. There were so many unknowns. But I needed to try. I needed to know. I filled out the paperwork, sent it in, and then I waited. The waiting was agony. Every day I checked my email obsessively, jumped every time my phone rang. Weeks passed with no word. I started to lose hope, started to think that maybe Rachel did not want to be found, that maybe I should just accept the family I had and stop searching for something that might not exist. And then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon in October, I got the call. Miss Thompson, the woman from the agency said, her voice warm. We have good news. We were able to locate Rachel, and she has agreed to meet you. She's very excited. She's been hoping for this day for a long time. The world tilted. I sat down hard on my couch, my legs suddenly unable to support me. She wants to meet me, I repeated, needing to hear it again, needing to make sure it was real. Yes, the woman confirmed. She lives about 2 hours away, in Portland. She suggested meeting at a coffee shop, somewhere neutral and public. Would that work for you? Yes, I said, my voice barely a whisper. Yes, that would work. We set a date for the following Saturday. 4 days away. 4 days to prepare myself for meeting the woman who had given birth to me, who had held me for 2 days and then let me go, who had been a ghost in my life for 23 years. I told Mom and Dad about the meeting. We had been slowly rebuilding our relationship, having dinner together once a week, talking on the phone every few days. It was different than before, more careful, more honest, but it was something. When I told them about Rachel, I saw a flash of fear cross their faces, but they hid it quickly. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Mom said, though her voice was tight. We're happy for you. Are you? I asked, because I needed to know. Are you really okay with this? Dad took a deep breath. We're scared, he admitted. Scared that you'll meet her and realize we're not enough. Scared that we'll lose you. But we also know that you need this. You need to know where you came from. And we need to support you in that, even if it's hard for us. His honesty meant everything. You're not going to lose me, I said. You're my parents. You raised me. Rachel is my birth mother, and I need to know her, but that doesn't erase you. There's room in my life for all of you. I hoped it was true. I hoped that meeting Rachel would not tear apart the fragile peace I had built with Mom and Dad. But I would not know until I tried. Saturday arrived cold and gray, the kind of autumn day that smelled like rain and dying leaves. I drove to Portland with Sarah, who had insisted on coming for moral support. She sat in the passenger seat, occasionally reaching over to squeeze my hand, not saying much, just being there. The coffee shop Rachel had chosen was in a quiet neighborhood, a small independent place with big windows and mismatched furniture. I parked across the street and sat there for a moment, staring at the entrance, my heart racing. "You've got this," Sarah said. "And I'll be right here if you need me. Just text me." I nodded, took a deep breath, and got out of the car. The air was crisp and cold, biting at my cheeks. I could smell coffee and cinnamon from the shop, could hear the faint sound of music playing inside. My legs felt like jelly as I walked to the door, pushed it open, heard the little bell chime above my head. And there she was. I knew it was her immediately, even though I had never seen a recent photo. She was sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a mug, her eyes fixed on the door. When she saw me, she stood up so fast she nearly knocked over her chair. We stared at each other across the coffee shop, and it was like looking into a mirror that showed me 25 years into the future. Same hair, same eyes, same shape of face. The resemblance was undeniable, almost eerie. "Emma," she said, and her voice broke on my name. She took a tentative step forward, then stopped, as if unsure whether she was allowed to come closer. I walked toward her, my feet moving on their own, and suddenly we were standing face to face. She was shorter than I expected, barely 5'4", and she was crying, tears streaming down her face unchecked. Up close, I could see the lines around her eyes, the silver threads in her hair, the way her hands trembled as she reached out and then pulled back, not sure if she was allowed to touch me. "Can I?" she started, her voice choked. "Can I hug you?" I nodded, not trusting my voice, and she pulled me into her arms. She smelled like lavender and something else, something that felt familiar in a way I could not explain. Maybe it was genetic memory, maybe it was wishful thinking, but being in her arms felt like coming home to a place I had never been. We stood there for a long moment, holding each other, crying, while the other coffee shop patrons politely pretended not to notice. Finally, we pulled apart and sat down at the table. She had already ordered me a coffee, somehow knowing that I took it with cream and 2 sugars. Maybe she had asked the agency. Maybe it was a lucky guess. Maybe we were more alike than I knew. "I can't believe you're here," she said, wiping at her eyes with a napkin. "I can't believe I'm finally meeting you. I've dreamed about this day for so long." "I have so many questions," I said, and she laughed, a sound that was both joyful and sad. "I'm sure you do. Ask me anything. I'll tell you everything." So I did. I asked her about her life, about what had happened after she gave me up. She told me that she had finished college, had become an elementary school teacher just like she had dreamed. She had married a man named Tom when she was 26, and they had 2 children, a boy and a girl. My half-siblings. The thought made my head spin. "Did you tell them about me?" I asked. "Yes," she said. "They know they have an older sister. They've always known. I never wanted to keep you a secret. You were too important, too loved, to be hidden away." The contrast with my own experience was stark. Rachel had been open about me with her family, while Mom and Dad had kept my adoption a secret. 2 different approaches, both coming from love, both with their own complications. I asked her about my biological father, and her face clouded over. "His name was Jason," she said. "We dated for about a year. When I told him I was pregnant, he said he wasn't ready to be a father and left. I haven't heard from him since. I tried to find him a few years ago, thought you might want to know about him, but he had moved and left no trace. I'm sorry I can't give you more information about that side of your family." "It's okay," I said, and I meant it. I had come here for her, not for him. Maybe someday I would want to search for my biological father, But right now, this was enough. We talked for hours. The coffee shop staff refilled our mugs multiple times, and the afternoon light faded into evening. She told me about her parents, my biological grandparents, who had passed away several years ago but who had always wondered about me, always hoped I was happy. She told me about her childhood, her interests, her quirks. I found myself laughing at her stories, seeing pieces of myself in her mannerisms, her sense of humor, the way she gestured when she talked. And I told her about my life. About Mom and Dad, about growing up in a small town, about my love of books and my job at the library. About Sarah and my apartment and my struggles over the past few months. She listened with such intensity, such hunger, like she was trying to absorb 23 years of missed moments all at once. I want you to know, she said as the evening grew late and we both knew we would have to leave soon, that giving you up was the hardest thing I ever did. But seeing you now, seeing the amazing person you've become, I know it was the right choice. Margaret and David did a beautiful job raising you. I'm so grateful to them. Her words about Mom and Dad made something loosen in my chest. Hearing her acknowledge them, thank them, somehow made it easier to hold both truths at once. Rachel was my birth mother, and she loved me. Mom and Dad were my parents, and they loved me. Both things could be true. Both things were true. Before we left, Rachel pulled out her phone and showed me pictures of her family. Tom, her husband, had kind eyes and a warm smile. My half-brother, Michael, was 16, tall and gangly with braces. My half-sister, Lily, was 13, with the same dark blonde hair Rachel and I shared. They were strangers, but they were also family. The thought was overwhelming and wonderful and terrifying all at once. They want to meet you, Rachel said. If you're ready. No pressure, no rush. But they're excited to have a big sister. I'd like that, I said. Maybe not right away, but soon. We exchanged phone numbers and email addresses and promised to stay in touch. When we finally stood to leave, Rachel hugged me again, holding on tight. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for finding me. Thank you for giving me this chance. Thank you for wanting to be found, I said back. I walked out of the coffee shop into the cold night air, and Sarah was there, waiting in the car, just like she had promised. She took one look at my face and smiled. It went well, she said. It was not a question. It went well, I confirmed, and then I started crying again, but this time they were different tears. Not tears of anger or betrayal or confusion, but tears of relief and joy and the strange, complicated happiness of finding a piece of yourself you did not know was missing. Over the next few months, Rachel and I built a relationship. We texted regularly, sent each other photos, talked on the phone every week. It was awkward sometimes, trying to build a connection with someone who was both a stranger and intimately connected to me. But it was also wonderful. I learned that I got my love of reading from her, that we both hated cilantro, that we both had the same nervous habit of twisting our hair when we were thinking. I also slowly repaired my relationship with Mom and Dad. It was not easy. There were hard conversations, moments of anger and hurt that bubbled up unexpectedly. But we worked through it, with the help of family therapy and time and a commitment to honesty. They met Rachel, which was awkward and emotional but ultimately healing. Rachel thanked them for raising me, and they thanked her for giving me life. It was messy and complicated and imperfect, but it was real. I met Michael and Lily on Thanksgiving, 6 months after my first meeting with Rachel. They welcomed me with an enthusiasm that was both touching and overwhelming. Lily wanted to know everything about me, asked a million questions, and declared that having a big sister was the best thing ever. Michael was more reserved, but I caught him smiling when I made a joke, and by the end of the day, we were talking about music and movies like we had known each other for years. I spent Christmas with Mom and Dad, keeping our tradition alive, but I also visited Rachel's family the day after, starting a new tradition. It was strange, moving between two families, two sets of people who all loved me in different ways. But it was also a gift. I had more love in my life than I had ever imagined possible. Dr. Chen told me during one of our sessions that identity is not fixed, that it is something we build and rebuild throughout our lives. Learning about my adoption had shattered my old identity, but it had also given me the opportunity to build a new one that was more complex and more true. I was Emma Thompson, daughter of Margaret and David, who had raised me with love and made mistakes along the way. I was also Emma, biological daughter of Rachel, who had loved me enough to let me go. I was a sister to Michael and Lily, a best friend to Sarah, a librarian, a reader, a person still figuring out who she was and who she wanted to be. The photograph that had started it all sat on my dresser now, in a frame next to a picture of Mom and Dad and me at my college graduation, and another picture of Rachel and me from that first meeting at the coffee shop. 3 images, 3 pieces of my story, all true, all important. 1 year after finding the photograph, I was sitting in my apartment, now decorated with plants and books and art that reflected who I was becoming, when I got a text from Mom. It was a picture of her and Dad in the kitchen, holding up a cake with messy frosting that spelled out, "We love you, Emma." The message below said, "Just wanted you to know we're thinking of you. We're proud of the person you are and grateful every day that we got to be your parents." I smiled, feeling that familiar mix of love and lingering hurt that I had learned to accept as part of our relationship now. I texted back a heart emoji and a promise to come for dinner that weekend. Then I got another text, this one from Rachel. It was a picture of her with Michael and Lily, all of them making silly faces at the camera. The message said, "The kids are asking when you're coming to visit again. We miss you." I sent back a laughing emoji and told her I would check my calendar. Finally, Sarah texted, asking if I wanted to come over for movie night. I said yes, grabbed my keys, and headed out into the cool evening air. As I drove through the familiar streets of my town, I thought about how much had changed in a year. I had lost something when I found that photograph, lost the simple story I had believed about myself. But I had also gained so much. I had gained Rachel and her family, gained a deeper understanding of Mom and Dad, gained a more complex and honest sense of who I was. The pain of the betrayal had not disappeared completely. I did not think it ever would. There were still moments when I felt angry, when I wondered what my life would have been like if they had told me from the beginning, if I had grown up knowing the truth. But I had learned to hold that pain alongside the love, to accept that people could hurt you and still be worth keeping in your life. I pulled up to Sarah's apartment and sat in the car for a moment, looking at the warm light spilling from her windows. Inside, my best friend was waiting, probably with popcorn and a terrible romantic comedy queued up, ready to make me laugh and forget my troubles for a few hours. It was such a simple thing, such an ordinary moment, but it felt precious. All of it felt precious now. The complicated family dinners, the awkward phone calls with Rachel, the therapy sessions, the quiet evenings alone in my apartment. All of it was part of my story, part of who I was becoming. I got out of the car and walked up to Sarah's door, and as I knocked, I realized something. I was okay. Not perfect, not healed completely, not without scars. But okay. I was building a life that was messy and complicated and full of love in all its imperfect forms. I was learning to hold multiple truths at once, to be angry and forgiving, to grieve and celebrate, to be both Emma Thompson and Emma, daughter of Rachel. The door opened, and Sarah pulled me inside with a grin, already launching into a story about her day. I let myself be pulled into her warmth, into the comfort of friendship, into the simple joy of being known and loved. And for the first time in a year, I felt something close to peace. The journey was not over. There would be more hard conversations, more moments of doubt and pain and confusion. I would continue to navigate the complicated terrain of having two families, of being adopted, of building an identity from fractured pieces. But I was not alone. I had Mom and Dad, imperfect but trying. I had Rachel, grateful and loving. I had Michael and Lily, excited to know their big sister. I had Sarah, my constant, my rock. And I had myself, stronger than I had known, more resilient than I had imagined. Not everything was what it seemed. The life I thought I had known had been built on lies. But underneath those lies had been love, messy and complicated and real. And maybe that was enough. Maybe that was more than enough. Maybe that was everything. As I settled onto Sarah's couch, wrapped in a blanket, laughing at her commentary on the terrible movie we were watching, I felt something shift inside me. The anger that had been sitting in my chest for a year, hard and heavy, began to soften. It did not disappear, but it made room for other things. For forgiveness, for understanding, for hope. I thought about the letter Rachel had written me 23 years ago, the words I had memorized by now. You were wanted. You were loved. You still are. It was true. I was wanted by Rachel, who had chosen to give me a better life. I was wanted by Mom and Dad, who had longed for a child and loved me fiercely despite their mistakes. I was wanted by Michael and Lily, who were thrilled to have a sister. I was wanted by Sarah, who had stood by me through the hardest year of my life. I was wanted. I was loved. And slowly, painfully, beautifully, I was learning to want and love myself, all the complicated, contradictory pieces of who I was. The movie played on, and Sarah made another joke, and I laughed, really laughed, the kind of laugh that comes from deep in your belly and makes your eyes water. It felt good. It felt like healing. Later that night, as I drove home through the quiet streets, I thought about calling Mom and Dad. Not because I had to, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to hear their voices. I wanted to tell them about my day, about the movie, about the small, ordinary moments that made up a life. I wanted to rebuild what we had lost, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. I also thought about texting Rachel, maybe sending her a funny meme or a picture of something that reminded me of her. Our relationship was still new, still fragile, but it was growing. Every conversation, every shared laugh, every moment of connection was building something real between us. When I got home, I did both. I called Mom and Dad, and we talked for half an hour about nothing important, just the comfortable chatter of family. Then I texted Rachel a silly photo, and she sent back a string of laughing emojis and a goodnight message. I got ready for bed, brushing my teeth, washing my face, going through the familiar routine. In the mirror, I studied my reflection, seeing Rachel's features mixed with something uniquely mine. I thought about all the people who had contributed to who I was. Rachel, who had given me life and her genes and her love from a distance. Mom and Dad, who had given me a home and their time and their imperfect, human love. Sarah, who had given me friendship and loyalty and laughter. Dr. Chen, who had given me tools to understand myself. Michael and Lily, who had given me the gift of being a big sister. I was not just one thing. I was not just adopted or just a daughter or just a sister or just a friend. I was all of it, a complicated tapestry woven from many threads, some chosen, some given, all part of the whole. As I climbed into bed, I felt grateful. Grateful for the photograph that had shattered my world, because it had also opened it up. Grateful for the pain, because it had led to growth. Grateful for the lies, because they had led to truth. Grateful for the journey, because it had led me here, to this moment, to this understanding, to this peace. I turned off the light and lay in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of my apartment. The hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of traffic, the creak of the building settling. These sounds had become home to me over the past year, markers of my independence, my journey toward understanding myself. Sleep came slowly, and with it, dreams. I dreamed of Rachel holding me as a baby, her face young and scared and full of love. I dreamed of Mom and Dad bringing me home from the hospital, their faces shining with joy and relief. I dreamed of all the moments I had missed, all the moments I had lived, all the moments still to come. The dreams were not sad or frightening. They were just dreams, pieces of my story floating through my subconscious, finding their place in the narrative I was building. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was streaming through my window, warm and golden. It was Sunday, my day off, and I had no plans except to exist, to be, to enjoy the quiet simplicity of a day with no obligations. I made coffee, the rich smell filling my small apartment, and sat by the window with a book, one of the many novels that lined my shelves. But I found I could not concentrate on the story. My mind kept wandering to my own story, to how far I had come, to how much further I still had to go. I thought about the future, about the relationships I was building, about the person I was becoming. I thought about Mom's upcoming birthday, about the collage I had originally planned to make before finding the photograph. Maybe I would still make it, but now it would include Rachel too, include all the people who had shaped my life. A visual representation of my complicated, beautiful family. I thought about Thanksgiving, now just a few weeks away, and how I would split my time between two families. It would be exhausting and emotional and probably a little awkward, but it would also be full of love. Both families wanted me there, wanted to share their traditions with me, wanted me to be part of their celebrations. That was a gift, even if it was a complicated one. I thought about Michael and Lily, about how they had started texting me regularly, sending me memes and asking for advice about school and friends. I was learning how to be a big sister, how to be someone they could look up to and confide in. It was a role I had never expected to have, but one I was growing to love. I thought about Dad teaching me to change a tire when I was 16, about Mom staying up all night with me when I had the flu in middle school, about 1,000 small moments of love and care that had shaped who I was. Those moments were real. The lies did not erase them. The truth did not diminish them. They were part of my foundation, part of what made me strong enough to handle this revelation and come out the other side. I thought about Rachel's letter, about her words of love and regret and hope. I thought about how brave she had been, giving me up, and how brave she was now, opening her life to me, risking rejection and pain for the chance to know me. I thought about how I wanted to be that brave, how I wanted to live with that kind of open-hearted courage. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. It was a group text from Rachel, including me, Michael, and Lily. She had sent a picture of a hiking trail, asking if we wanted to go on a family hike next weekend. Michael responded with an enthusiastic yes, and Lily sent a string of excited emojis. I smiled and typed back that I would be there. Another text came in, this one from Mom, asking if I wanted to come over for dinner that night. Dad was making his famous lasagna. I said yes to that too, my heart full at the thought of sitting around their table, eating comfort food, being part of the family that had raised me. I was learning to say yes. Yes to both families. Yes to complicated relationships. Yes to the messy, imperfect reality of my life. Yes to healing, even when it was hard. Yes to forgiveness, even when the hurt was still fresh. Yes to love in all its forms. The rest of the day passed quietly. I cleaned my apartment, did laundry, went for a walk in the park where I had cried a year ago. The leaves were falling now, carpeting the ground in shades of red and gold and brown. The air was crisp and smelled like autumn, like change, like endings and beginnings all mixed together. I sat under the same oak tree where I had sat that terrible day, but this time I was not crying. I was just sitting, breathing, being. I traced the carved initials in the bark, ET plus MT plus DT, and instead of feeling betrayed by them, I felt connected. This was still my family. They were still my people. The addition of Rachel and Michael and Lily did not subtract from what I had with Mom and Dad. It just added more. More love, more connection, more family. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of the carved initials, then sent it to Mom and Dad with a message. Still here. Still yours. Still love you. Mom responded immediately with a heart emoji and the words, "We love you too, sweetheart. So much." Dad sent a separate text. "See you tonight. Can't wait." I smiled and put my phone away, leaning back against the tree, feeling the rough bark through my jacket. The sun was warm on my face, and I closed my eyes, letting myself just feel. Feel the warmth, the breeze, the solid ground beneath me, the beating of my own heart. I was here. I was alive. I was loved. I was enough. That evening, I drove to Mom and Dad's house, the house where I had grown up, the house that held so many memories. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw them both standing on the porch, waiting for me, their faces lit up with smiles. They looked older than I remembered, more fragile, but also more real. They were not perfect parents. They had made terrible mistakes. But they were mine, and I was theirs, and that meant something. I got out of the car and walked up the path, and they both hugged me at once, a group hug that felt warm and safe and like home. We went inside, and the house smelled like lasagna and garlic bread and all the comfort foods of my childhood. We sat around the table, the same table where we had had that terrible conversation a year ago, but tonight was different. Tonight we laughed and talked and shared stories. Tonight we were a family, imperfect and healing and real. After dinner, we moved to the living room, and Mom brought out old photo albums. We looked through them together, and this time, instead of feeling like lies, the photos felt like chapters in a larger story. Here was me as a baby, held by Mom and Dad, their faces glowing with new parent joy. Here was me on my first day of kindergarten, gap-toothed and excited. Here was me at my 8th grade graduation, awkward and braces-faced. Here was me at prom, all dressed up and nervous. Every photo was a moment in time, a piece of my history, a testament to the life we had built together. Mom pulled out another album, one I had not seen before. This one had pictures from before I was born. Pictures of Mom and Dad younger, hopeful, visiting the adoption agency. Pictures of them preparing my nursery, painting the walls, assembling the crib. Pictures of them holding me for the first time, their faces showing a mix of joy and terror and overwhelming love. And there, tucked in the back, were more pictures of Rachel. Rachel pregnant, her hand on her belly. Rachel in the hospital, looking exhausted and sad and brave. Rachel holding me, her face a mask of love and grief. And one picture I had not seen before, of Rachel handing me to Mom, both women crying, both women loving me in their own ways. I stared at that picture for a long time, trying to imagine what that moment must have been like. The pain Rachel must have felt, letting go of her baby. The joy and fear Mom must have felt, receiving this precious gift. The weight of that moment, the significance of that exchange, the love that had made it possible. "Thank you for showing me these," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for not hiding them anymore." "We should have shown you years ago," Dad said. "We should have been honest from the start. But we're trying to do better now. We're trying to give you the truth, even when it's hard." "I know," I said. "And I appreciate it. I really do." We talked late into the night, about Rachel, about the adoption, about the past year and how hard it had been for all of us. We talked about the future too, about how we would navigate holidays and birthdays and all the complicated logistics of having two families. It was not easy, and there were moments of tension and hurt feelings, but we worked through it. We were learning to communicate, to be honest, to trust each other again. When I finally left, it was past midnight. Mom and Dad walked me to my car, and we stood in the driveway for a moment, the night air cold and clear, stars visible above us. "Drive safe," Mom said, hugging me tight. "Text us when you get home." "I will," I promised. "I love you both." "We love you too," Dad said, his voice gruff with emotion. "So much, Emma. So much." I drove home with a full heart, the kind of fullness that comes from connection and honesty and hard-won peace. When I got to my apartment, I texted Mom and Dad like I had promised, then got ready for bed. Before I turned off the light, I looked at the 3 framed photos on my dresser. The photograph of Rachel holding me as a newborn. The photograph of Mom and Dad and me at my graduation. And the new photograph I had added recently, from the family hike with Rachel, Michael, and Lily, all of us smiling and windblown and happy. 3 photos. 3 families. 1 me. It was complicated and messy and sometimes painful, but it was also beautiful. It was my life, my story, my truth. The weeks passed, and I continued to build my relationships with both families. I had dinner with Mom and Dad every Sunday. I video chatted with Rachel every Wednesday. I texted with Michael and Lily almost daily, their youthful energy and enthusiasm bringing lightness to my days. I continued therapy with Dr. Chen, working through the layers of emotion and identity that came with being a late discovery adoptee. I also started writing. Not for publication, just for myself. I wrote about my journey, about the pain and the healing, about the questions I still had and the answers I had found. Writing helped me process, helped me make sense of the chaos, helped me see how far I had come. One day, about 18 months after finding the photograph, I was at the library where I worked, shelving books in the adoption and family section, when a young woman approached me. She looked nervous, her hands twisting together, her eyes darting around like she was afraid of being overheard. "Excuse me," she said quietly. "I saw you putting books away in this section, and I was wondering if you could help me." I just found out I'm adopted, and I don't know where to start. I don't know how to process this. I looked at her, saw my own pain and confusion reflected in her face, and felt a surge of compassion. I remembered what it was like to be in her shoes, to feel like your whole world had been turned upside down, to not know who to talk to or where to turn. I'd be happy to help, I said gently. Why don't we sit down, and you can tell me what's going on? We sat at one of the library tables, and she poured out her story. It was different from mine in the details, but the same in the emotions. The betrayal, the confusion, the anger, the grief. I listened without judgment, offering tissues when she cried, nodding and understanding when she expressed feelings I knew all too well. When she finished, I told her my story. Not all of it, just enough to let her know she was not alone, that what she was feeling was valid, that there was a path through this even if she could not see it yet. I gave her the names of therapists who specialized in adoption, recommended books that had helped me, told her about online support groups where she could connect with other adoptees. Thank you, she said when we were done, her eyes red but her face calmer. Thank you for understanding. Thank you for not judging me for being angry at my parents. Everyone keeps telling me I should just be grateful they raised me, but it's more complicated than that. It is more complicated than that, I agreed. You can be grateful and angry at the same time. You can love them and feel betrayed by them. Both things can be true. She nodded, looking relieved to have her feelings validated. We exchanged email addresses, and I told her she could reach out anytime she needed to talk. As she left, I felt something shift inside me. My pain, my journey, had given me the ability to help someone else. It had given me empathy and understanding and wisdom I would not have had otherwise. It did not make the pain worth it, exactly, but it gave it meaning. It gave it purpose. That night, I told Dr. Chen about the encounter during our session. She smiled, that warm, knowing smile she had. That's a sign of healing, she said. When you can take your pain and use it to help others, when you can find meaning in your suffering, that's when you know you're moving forward. You're not just surviving anymore, Emma. You're thriving. Her words stayed with me. Was I thriving? I thought about my life now, about the relationships I had rebuilt and the new ones I had formed. I thought about the hard work I had done in therapy, the difficult conversations I had navigated, the forgiveness I had extended and received. I thought about the young woman at the library and how I had been able to offer her comfort and guidance. Maybe Dr. Chen was right. Maybe I was thriving. 2 years after finding the photograph, I organized a big family gathering. It was ambitious, maybe even crazy, but I wanted to bring everyone together. Mom and Dad, Rachel and Tom, Michael and Lily, Sarah and her new boyfriend. All the people who mattered to me, all in one place. We met at a park for a picnic, neutral territory where no one felt like a guest in someone else's home. I was nervous as I set up, spreading out blankets and unpacking food, wondering if this was a terrible idea. What if it was awkward? What if old tensions flared up? What if someone said the wrong thing and ruined everything? But as people started arriving, my fears began to ease. Mom and Dad came first, bringing their famous potato salad and warm hugs. Rachel and her family arrived next, and there was a moment of tension when Rachel and Mom came face to face, but then Mom stepped forward and hugged her. Thank you, Mom said simply. Thank you for the gift of Emma. Rachel hugged her back, both women crying. Thank you for loving her the way she deserved to be loved, Rachel replied. I watched this exchange with tears streaming down my face, overwhelmed by the grace and love these two women were showing each other. They could have been rivals, could have competed for my affection, could have made this so much harder than it needed to be. But instead, they chose kindness. They chose to honor each other's role in my life. They chose love. The rest of the day was better than I could have imagined. Michael and Lily played frisbee with Dad, their laughter ringing across the park. Mom and Rachel sat together on a blanket, looking at photos on their phones, sharing stories about me. Tom and Sarah's boyfriend bonded over their shared love of baseball. And I moved between all of them, feeling like the center of a web of love and connection. At one point, I stood back and just watched, taking in the scene. All these people, from different parts of my life, different chapters of my story, all here because they loved me. It was overwhelming in the best possible way. Sarah came up beside me and put her arm around my shoulders. "You did good," she said. "This is really special." "I know," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "I can't believe this is my life now." "You deserve it," she said firmly. "You deserve all of this love. You always did." As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the park, we all gathered for a group photo. Mom and Dad on one side of me, Rachel and Tom on the other, Michael and Lily in front, Sarah and her boyfriend behind. All of us together, all of us smiling, all of us family in our own complicated, beautiful way. That photo now sits on my dresser with the others, a testament to how far we had all come, how much we had all grown. It was not a traditional family photo, but then again, we were not a traditional family. We were something else, something harder to define but no less real. We were a family built on love and loss and forgiveness and second chances. We were a family that had been broken and put back together, not quite the same as before, but maybe even stronger for having been broken. 3 years after finding the photograph, I was sitting in Dr. Chen's office for what would be one of our last sessions. I had been seeing her regularly for 3 years, and she had been instrumental in my healing, but we both agreed that I was ready to move forward on my own. "How do you feel?" she asked, her pen poised over her notepad, though she rarely wrote anything down anymore. These days our sessions were more like conversations between friends than therapy. "I feel good," I said, and I meant it. "I feel like I know who I am now. Not completely, I'm still figuring things out, but I have a foundation. I know where I came from, both biologically and in terms of who raised me. I know that I'm loved by multiple families. I know that I'm strong enough to handle hard truths. I know that I can forgive without forgetting, that I can love imperfect people, that I can hold complexity without needing everything to be simple." She smiled. "That's beautiful, Emma. You've done incredible work. You came in here 3 years ago completely shattered, and look at you now. You've rebuilt yourself into something even more whole than you were before." "I couldn't have done it without help," I said. "Without you, without Sarah, without my families being willing to do the work too." "That's true," she said. "Healing is rarely a solo journey. But you had to be willing to do the work, and you were. You showed up, even when it was hard. You asked the difficult questions. You sat with uncomfortable emotions. You extended grace to people who had hurt you. That takes courage." We talked for the rest of the session about my plans for the future, about how I would continue to maintain my mental health, about warning signs to watch for that might indicate I needed to come back. When our time was up, she hugged me, something she had never done before. "I'm so proud of you," she said. and I'm honored to have been part of your journey. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with emotion. For everything. You changed my life. You changed your own life, she corrected gently. I just helped you see what was possible. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in years. The weight I had been carrying, the weight of secrets and lies and betrayal, had finally lifted. I was free. Not free from my past, but free from being defined by it. I was Emma, adopted daughter, biological daughter, sister, friend, librarian, writer, survivor, thriver. I was all of it, and I was enough. That night, I had dinner with Mom and Dad, just the three of us. It had become our tradition, Sunday dinners, just like when I was growing up. But now there was an honesty between us that had not existed before, a depth to our relationship that came from having weathered the storm together. I have something to tell you, I said as we were finishing dessert. I've been writing about my experience, about finding out I was adopted, about the journey of the past 3 years. And I think I want to publish it. Not as a book, maybe just as a blog or a series of essays. But I want to share my story, in case it helps someone else going through the same thing. Mom and Dad exchanged a look, and I saw a flash of fear cross their faces. They were probably worried about how they would be portrayed, about what people would think of them. I want you to know, I continued, that I'm not writing it to shame you or to paint you as villains. I'm writing it to tell the truth, which includes the fact that you made a mistake, but also that you loved me and that we worked through it. I'm writing it because I think there are other people out there who need to hear that it's possible to heal from this kind of betrayal, that families can survive hard truths. Mom's eyes filled with tears. We support you, she said. Whatever you need to write, whatever you need to say, we support you. We made mistakes, and if sharing your story helps someone else, then something good will have come from our failures. Dad nodded in agreement. We're proud of you, Emma. For your strength, for your willingness to forgive us, for turning your pain into something that might help others. We're so proud. I reached across the table and took both their hands. I love you, I said. Both of you. And I'm grateful for everything you've given me, even the hard lessons. We sat there for a moment, hands linked, three people who had been through hell together and come out the other side. It was not perfect. There were still moments of tension, still scars that had not fully healed. But we were together, and we were trying, and that was enough. I started the blog a few weeks later, calling it Not Everything Is What It Seems. I wrote about finding the photograph, about the confrontation with Mom and Dad, about meeting Rachel, about the long process of healing and forgiveness. I wrote honestly about the anger and the pain, but also about the love and the growth. I wrote about the complexity of adoption, about how it could be both a beautiful thing and a traumatic thing, sometimes at the same time. The response was overwhelming. I got emails from other late discovery adoptees, thanking me for putting their feelings into words, for making them feel less alone. I got messages from adoptive parents, asking for advice on how to tell their children the truth. I got notes from birth mothers, sharing their own stories of loss and love. My story had touched something in people, had opened up conversations that needed to be had. One email in particular stood out. It was from a woman named Jennifer, who had just found out at age 35 that she was adopted. She was in the early stages of shock and anger, and she did not know how to move forward. She asked if we could talk, and I agreed. We met at a coffee shop, the same one where I had first met Rachel, and I shared my story with her in more detail than I had written in the blog. I told her about the therapy, about the hard conversations, about the slow process of rebuilding trust. I told her that it was okay to be angry, okay to grieve, okay to take as much time as she needed. "Does it get better?" she asked, her eyes desperate for hope. "It gets different," I said honestly. "The pain doesn't disappear completely, but it becomes more manageable. You learn to integrate this new information into your sense of self. You learn to hold multiple truths at once. And yes, eventually, it does get better. But it takes time and work and a willingness to sit with uncomfortable emotions." She nodded, wiping at her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for being honest. Everyone keeps telling me I should just get over it, that it doesn't change anything, but it changes everything." "It does change everything," I agreed. "And anyone who tells you otherwise doesn't understand. But you will get through this. I promise." Over the next year, I connected with dozens of people through my blog, building a community of adoptees and adoptive parents and birth parents, all trying to navigate the complicated terrain of adoption. I started a monthly support group that met at the library, a safe space for people to share their stories and their struggles. It became one of the most meaningful parts of my life, using my pain to help others, building connection out of shared experience. For years after finding the photograph, Rachel asked if I would be willing to speak at an adoption conference. She had been volunteering with the agency that had facilitated my adoption, helping other birth mothers navigate the process, and they were looking for adoptees to share their perspectives. I was nervous about speaking in front of a large group, but I agreed. The conference was in Seattle, and Rachel came with me for moral support. We spent the weekend together, just the two of us, and it was wonderful. We had moved past the awkwardness of our early relationship and had settled into something comfortable and real. She was not my mom in the way that Margaret was my mom, but she was important to me, a vital part of my story and my identity. When it was time for me to speak, I stood at the podium and looked out at the audience. There were adoptive parents, hopeful and nervous. There were birth mothers, some pregnant, some who had already placed their children. There were adoptees of all ages, some who had always known about their adoption, some who had found out later in life like me. There were social workers and therapists and agency staff. All of them were there because adoption had touched their lives in some way. I took a deep breath and began to speak. I told my story, from finding the photograph to this moment, for years later. I talked about the pain and the anger, but also about the healing and the love. I talked about the importance of honesty, of telling adoptees the truth from the beginning, of not letting fear dictate your choices. I talked about the complexity of adoption, about how it could be both a trauma and a gift, about how all the feelings were valid. When I finished, the room was silent for a moment, and then people began to clap. Some were crying. Some were nodding in recognition. Some looked shell-shocked, like they were seeing adoption in a new light for the first time. After my talk, dozens of people came up to me, thanking me for my honesty, sharing their own stories, asking for advice. One woman, a birth mother who had placed her daughter for adoption 15 years earlier, grabbed my hand and held it tight. "Thank you," she said, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for saying that birth mothers love their children. People act like we just give them away without a second thought, but it's not like that. It's the hardest thing I've ever done, and I think about her every single day." "I know," I said, squeezing her hand back. "Rachel told me the same thing. You made an impossible choice out of love. That matters." She hugged me, and we stood there for a moment, two people connected by the strange, complicated world of adoption. When she pulled away, she looked lighter, like some burden had been lifted. That night, Rachel and I had dinner at a restaurant overlooking the water. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, and the air smelled like salt and possibility. "I'm so proud of you," Rachel said, raising her glass in a toast. "You took something painful and turned it into something beautiful. You're helping so many people." "I learned from you," I said. "You made an impossible choice out of love, and that taught me what real love looks like. It's not always easy or comfortable. Sometimes it means letting go. Sometimes it means holding on. But it's always worth it." We clinked glasses, and I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. Gratitude for Rachel, for giving me life and for being brave enough to let me go and then brave enough to welcome me back. Gratitude for Mom and Dad, for loving me imperfectly but wholly, for doing the hard work of rebuilding trust. Gratitude for Michael and Lily, for accepting me as their sister without hesitation. Gratitude for Sarah, for being my constant through every storm. Gratitude for Dr. Chen, for guiding me through the darkest parts of my journey. Gratitude for every person who had read my blog or come to my support group or shared their story with me. I was grateful for all of it, even the pain, because it had led me here, to this moment, to this understanding, to this life that was messy and complicated and absolutely beautiful. 5 years after finding the photograph, I was invited to write a book. A publisher had found my blog and thought my story would resonate with a wider audience. I was hesitant at first, worried about exposing my family to that level of scrutiny, but after talking it through with everyone involved, I decided to do it. Writing the book was cathartic and exhausting. I had to relive every painful moment, had to dig deep into emotions I had worked hard to process. But it was also healing in a way I had not expected. Putting my story into a cohesive narrative helped me see how far I had come, helped me appreciate the journey even as I acknowledged how hard it had been. Mom and Dad read the manuscript before it was published, and I was nervous about their reaction. But when they finished, they both hugged me and told me it was honest and fair and that they were proud of me for telling the truth. Rachel read it too, and she called me crying after she finished. "You captured it," she said through her tears. "You captured what it felt like to give you up, what it felt like to meet you again. Thank you for honoring my story too." The book was published on a crisp autumn day, exactly 5 years after I had found the photograph. I had a small launch party at the library where I worked, surrounded by all the people who had been part of my journey. Mom and Dad were there, holding hands, looking nervous but proud. Rachel was there with Tom and Michael and Lily, all of them beaming. Sarah was there, of course, my constant, my rock. Dr. Chen came, which surprised and touched me. Colleagues from the library, members of my support group, people I had connected with through my blog, all of them came to celebrate. I gave a short speech, thanking everyone for their support, for their love, for their willingness to be part of my messy, complicated story. I talked about how 5 years ago, I had thought my life was over, that discovering I was adopted had shattered everything I knew about myself. But instead, it had been a beginning. A beginning of a deeper understanding of love and family and identity. A beginning of healing and growth and connection. As I looked around the room at all these people who loved me, I felt overwhelmed with emotion. This was my family. Not just Mom and Dad, not just Rachel and her kids, but all of these people who had shown up for me, who had supported me, who had been part of my journey. Family was not just about blood or legal documents. Family was about showing up, about loving imperfectly, about choosing each other again and again. After the party, I went home to my apartment, which I had decorated with photos from every stage of my life. Baby pictures with mom and dad. The photograph of Rachel holding me in the hospital. Pictures from family gatherings with both families. Pictures with Sarah, with Michael and Lily, with all the people who mattered. My walls were a testament to my complicated, beautiful life. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, looking out at the city lights, thinking about everything that had happened in the past 5 years. I had been broken and put back together. I had been angry and learned to forgive. I had been lost and found myself. I had been alone and built a community. I had been a victim of lies and become an advocate for truth. I thought about the young woman I had been 5 years ago, standing in the kitchen with that photograph, feeling like her world was ending. If I could go back and talk to her, what would I say? I would tell her that it was going to be okay. That the pain was real and valid, but that it would not last forever. That she was stronger than she knew. That she was loved more than she could imagine. That the journey ahead would be hard, but it would also be worth it. I would tell her that not everything is what it seems, but that does not mean it is not real. The love she had experienced was real, even if it was built on a foundation of lies. The family she had known was real, even if the story she had been told was incomplete. She was real, even if her understanding of herself had to be rebuilt from the ground up. I would tell her that she would survive this. More than survive. She would thrive. She would take her pain and turn it into purpose. She would help others. She would build bridges between families. She would learn to hold complexity without needing everything to be simple. She would become someone she could be proud of. But I could not go back and tell her those things. I could only sit here, 5 years later, and be grateful that she had been brave enough to keep going, to do the work, to choose healing over bitterness. I was grateful to her for not giving up, for fighting through the pain, for building this life that I now got to live. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Just wanted to say we love you and we're so proud of your book. You're an amazing writer and an even more amazing person. Another text came in from Rachel. I'm reading your book again and crying all over again. Thank you for telling our story with so much grace and honesty. I love you. Another from Michael. Hey big sis, just finished your book for my English class. My teacher loved it and wants you to come speak to our class. Also, it made me cry, which I will deny if you tell anyone. Another from Lily. Your book is so good. All my friends want to read it now. You're basically famous. Love you. Another from Sarah. I always knew you were going to do something amazing. So proud to be your best friend. Love you forever. I read through all the messages, my heart full to bursting. This was my life now. This was my family, my community, my purpose. It was not the life I had imagined 5 years ago, but it was better. It was real and honest and full of love in all its complicated forms. I responded to each message with love and gratitude, then set my phone down and returned to looking out the window. The city was alive with lights and movement, thousands of people living their own complicated stories, facing their own challenges, building their own families in whatever form that took. I thought about all the people who would read my book, who would see themselves in my story, who would find comfort in knowing they were not alone. I thought about the conversations it might start, the healing it might facilitate, the bridges it might build between adoptees and adoptive parents and birth parents. I thought about the young woman at the library who had approached me 3 years ago, lost and confused and desperate for guidance. I had heard from her recently. She had reconciled with her adoptive parents, had found her birth mother, was building her own version of a blended family. She had thanked me for helping her see that healing was possible, that she did not have to choose between anger and love, that she could hold both. I thought about all the people in my support group, sharing their stories, supporting each other, building community out of shared pain. I thought about how adoption had brought us together, how our wounds had become the foundation for connection and healing. I thought about Mom and Dad, about how far we had come from that terrible day in the kitchen. We had done the work. We had had the hard conversations. We had extended grace and forgiveness. We had rebuilt trust, brick by brick, conversation by conversation. Our relationship was different now, more honest, more real, and in some ways, stronger than it had been before. I thought about Rachel, about the gift she had given me twice. Once when she gave me life and chose to place me with a family who could give me what she could not. And again when she welcomed me back into her life, when she opened her heart and her family to me, when she gave me the gift of knowing where I came from. I thought about Michael and Lily, about the joy of being a big sister, about watching them grow and being part of their lives. I thought about how they had accepted me without question, how they had made room for me in their family, how they had given me a role I had never expected to have. I thought about Sarah, my constant, my rock, the friend who had been there through everything. She had held me when I cried, had celebrated with me when I healed, had never wavered in her support and love. She was family in the truest sense of the word, chosen and cherished. I thought about Dr. Chen, about how she had guided me through the darkest parts of my journey, how she had given me tools to understand myself, how she had helped me see that healing was possible even when it seemed impossible. I thought about all the people who had read my blog, who had shared their stories with me, who had trusted me with their pain and their hope. They had taught me that I was not alone, that my experience was both unique and universal, that there was power in sharing our stories. And I thought about myself, about the person I had become over the past 5 years. I was not the same Emma who had found that photograph in the attic. I was someone who had been broken and rebuilt herself. Someone who had faced hard truths and come out stronger. Someone who had learned to forgive without forgetting, to love without conditions, to hold complexity without needing simple answers. I was Emma Thompson, adopted daughter of Margaret and David, biological daughter of Rachel, sister to Michael and Lily, best friend to Sarah, writer, advocate, survivor, thriver. I was all of it, and I was enough. More than enough. I was exactly who I was supposed to be. The night grew late, and I finally stood up from my window seat, stretching my stiff muscles. I got ready for bed, going through my familiar routine, and as I climbed under the covers, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for so long. Tomorrow I would wake up and continue building this life I had created. I would go to work at the library, would help patrons find books, would maybe connect with another person struggling with adoption issues. I would have dinner with Mom and Dad, would video chat with Rachel, would text with Michael and Lily. I would write, would share my story, would continue to build community and connection. But tonight, I would rest. I would let myself feel the peace of having done the work, of having faced the hard truths, of having chosen healing over bitterness. I would let myself feel grateful for this messy, complicated, beautiful life. As I drifted off to sleep, my last thought was of that photograph, the one that had started it all. It sat on my dresser, surrounded by other photos, other moments, other pieces of my story. It was no longer a symbol of betrayal and lies. It was a symbol of truth and love and the complicated beauty of family in all its forms. Not everything was what it seemed. But sometimes, when you looked deeper, when you did the work, when you chose love over fear, what you found was even better than what you had imagined. Sometimes the truth, as painful as it was, set you free. Sometimes being broken was the first step to becoming whole. Sometimes the end of one story was the beginning of another, better one. And sometimes, just sometimes, family was not about blood or biology or legal documents. Family was about showing up, about loving imperfectly, about choosing each other again and again, about building something real and honest and true out of the messy, complicated reality of being human. I had found my family. All of them. And they had found me. And that, more than anything else, was enough. The morning sun would rise tomorrow, as it always did, bringing with it new challenges and new joys. But I was ready. I had been tested and had not broken. I had been hurt and had healed. I had been lost and had found my way home. Not everything was what it seemed. But I was real. My love was real. My family, in all its complicated forms, was real. And that was all that mattered. I closed my eyes and let sleep take me, secure in the knowledge that I was loved, that I was enough, that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led me here, to this moment of peace, to this understanding, to this life that was mine and mine alone. And in the morning, I would wake up and live it, fully and honestly and with an open heart. Because that was what I had learned. That was what 5 years of pain and healing and growth had taught me. To live fully, to love deeply, to embrace complexity, to tell the truth, to forgive, to heal, to thrive. Not everything was what it seemed. But I was learning to see clearly, to look beyond the surface, to find the truth beneath the lies, the love beneath the pain, the beauty beneath the brokenness. And that was enough. That was everything.